Betrayed by my own brother when he chooses my ex-husband over me. So I cut ties with him. Now he is broke, he comes to my place to demand money and help. So, here's the deal. I'm 36 and I divorced Nolan, my ex, who's 34, about 5 years ago. We were together for nearly 6 years and married for 2 before things fell apart because he cheated. He admitted to having an affair with a co-worker just a couple of months after our 2-year anniversary, and that was the last straw for me. He claimed he wanted to fix things and come clean, but once I found out about the cheating, I was done. I told him to move out and we went through with the divorce. I kept the house and he quickly moved on to marry the co-worker he cheated with just weeks after our divorce was finalized. They packed up and moved to Philadelphia and we haven't talked or seen each other since. Honestly, I'm relieved I didn't give him another shot. The affair not only wrecked my marriage but also messed up my relationship. I really thought Julian would back me up during the divorce, despite their friendship. Nolan cheated on me and Julian is my brother, so I figured he'd get where I was coming from and support me. When I broke the news to my family about divorcing Nolan due to his cheating, I was shocked to learn that Julian already knew about it since Nolan had spilled the beans to him. Julian suggested I should stick with Nolan and try to fix things because he believed Nolan genuinely wanted to save our marriage. I couldn't believe he'd even say that and I firmly told him there was no way I was staying with Nolan. I also let him know how disappointed I was that he was still in contact with Nolan after everything he put me through. I was really struggling with the divorce and the affair, so I thought Julian would cut ties with Nolan. Instead, we ended up arguing because Julian felt it was unfair for me to expect him to ditch a longtime friend just because I was going through a tough time. He insisted he wanted to stay out of it and keep his friendship with Nolan while also maintaining a good relationship with me. I wasn't sure if I was being unreasonable, but I thought his approach was way too diplomatic and I told him it wouldn't work for me. I made it clear that he had to choose between staying friends with Nolan or having a relationship with me, his sister. I really thought he'd choose me since we were super close growing up. I made it clear to my brother that I wasn't cool with him hanging out with my ex-husband. To my surprise, he decided to stick with Nolan and told me I was being unreasonable. He called me petty and immature, saying he preferred to be around people who valued him instead of being forced to pick sides between 2 people he cared about, which he felt I was making him do. I was really let down by that and since then, I've cut off contact with Julian because he disappointed me. He even went to Nolan's second wedding with his affair partner, which was just too much for me. 5 years have gone by and we still haven't talked. Our parents have tried to help us patch things up, but we both know where we stand. I visit my parents during the holidays, and so does he. We run into each other at family events like weddings, but we never say a word to each other. Honestly, I don't even know what to say. I hear from my parents about the big things happening in his life, like milestones and stuff. I found out a couple of years ago that he started his own graphic design business. Before that, he was freelancing and doing pretty well, but then he decided to team up with some friends to launch his own thing. It's been 3 years, and from what my parents have told me, things have been going pretty well for them. I thought that was great, but then a few days ago, I got a call from them saying Julian was in serious trouble and needed my help right away. It turns out Julian hadn't been completely honest about his business situation, and now he's buried in debt and got kicked out of his apartment for not paying rent for the last 6 months. Now he's got nowhere to crash, and unlike his friends, he's too proud to move back in with his parents or even ask them to help with his rent. I didn't know what to say, so I just told him it was really unfortunate and that I wished I could do something, thinking that's what my parents wanted me to say. But besides that, I was at a loss, and then they suggested I could let him stay with me. Right now, he's without a place and is crashing at his girlfriend's, but she has a roommate, so he can't stay there for more than a couple of weeks. 1 week has already gone by, so he really needs to find somewhere fast. At least a temporary spot where he can hang out for a couple of months until he gets back on his feet. Apparently, my parents offered to let him move back in with them, but he turned it down, saying he didn't want to go back after being independent for so long. They even offered him some cash to help him get by, but he said no to that too, so now they're reaching out to me for help. I made it super clear to them that I wasn't going to reach out to him since we hadn't talked in 5 years. Not only would it be awkward, but I just wasn't interested in doing it. I've got enough going on in my life, and I don't want to take on someone else's issues too. They kept saying I was the only one who could talk to him and maybe he'd listen if I offered my help since we used to be really close. I reminded them that while we were once tight, we're not exactly in touch anymore. I tried to explain that if he wasn't accepting help from them, he probably wouldn't take it from me either. But my parents just wouldn't listen and kept pushing me to reach out and help him. In the end, I had to be really firm and told them I wasn't going to talk to him and that was my final word. Then they started getting all dramatic on the call, saying I was being selfish and needed to think about my brother instead of being so self-centered. They claimed my ego had already messed up our relationship once and now I was about to do it again by not even trying to talk to him when he's struggling. They really believed that just talking to him would change everything because back when we were good, he looked up to me. I could see they were trying to play with my emotions and honestly, it kind of worked. Should I reach out to my brother and offer him my help? Update 1. After thinking it over, I decided not to contact him. I talked to a few friends and checked out the comments on my post and everyone seemed to agree. What my brother did in the past was really messed up and disrespectful, so I don't feel like I owe him any help, especially since he hasn't even asked for it. If he reaches out to me first and asks for help, that's a different story, but just because my parents think I should take the initiative doesn't mean I have to. It's been 4 days since I last talked to them and this morning, I called to share my decision. Every day since I posted, they've been bombarding me with calls and texts asking if I've talked to Julian yet. Today, I finally had to tell them to chill out because I'm not going to do what they want. When I said that, they got all manipulative, claiming I was the only one who could fix this. I made it clear that I didn't care if I was the only one, it's not my issue to handle, so I'm not getting involved. Then my parents said it was a problem Julian was facing, and since he's my brother, it's my problem too. So, they think that because we're family, we should all take on each other's problems like they're our own and handle them. It's funny how they told me that, but they didn't feel the same way when Julian and I were at odds over the whole Nolan mess. By their reasoning, if Nolan had cheated on me and it was messing up my life, Julian should have cut ties with Nolan right away, since it should have been his issue too. It just doesn't add up for them to suddenly have these morals for me, but not for him. I even brought it up and asked why they didn't feel the same way when I was dealing with my stuff. They had no answer. Instead, they accused me of twisting their words and claimed I was just trying to find a reason not to help my brother, calling me selfish and disgraceful. That's when they had no excuses for themselves or Julian and were just trying to paint me as the villain. I told them I was okay with being selfish and disgraceful, but I had made my decision and asked them to leave me alone. I thought that would wrap things up, but then my mom said something that really got under my skin. She mentioned that she always knew I had a big ego, which she thought was a failure on their part as parents, but she never expected me to be so cold-hearted that maybe Julian was right to choose Nolan over me. Everyone knows that's a touchy subject for me, and I really hate when people bring it up. So when she mentioned it, I knew she was trying to hurt me on purpose. And she definitely succeeded, it really got under my skin, and I was super upset. I completely forgot about hanging up and confronted her about her comment. I ended up yelling because I lost my cool, telling her she had no right to say that, especially since she knew what went down with Nolan and Julian wasn't okay. There was no excuse for her words, and she tried to defend herself by saying she recognized that Julian's actions were wrong. But based on how I was reacting, she thought maybe it was the right choice in the long run because I seemed too selfish to consider anyone else's feelings. It was so frustrating to even have that discussion because they were being so blind and ridiculous. I was so furious that I didn't even realize arguing was pointless, I just wanted to vent all my anger and keep shouting until they admitted they were wrong. We ended up arguing for nearly 15 minutes, with my parents calling me selfish while I shot back that they were disrespectful and only cared about my brother, not my feelings. By the end of it, I told them I never wanted to talk to them again and that I was done. Then, I hung up and immediately blocked their numbers. Ever since that chat, I've been trying to chill out, but it's tough because I've been so worked up. I reached out to a few friends to let off some steam, and they all agreed that blocking my parents was the right move. They suggested that if my parents try to reach out again, I should just ignore them. They've made their priorities clear, and I don't need to deal with their drama anymore. I've got my own issues to handle, so I'm planning to focus on that from now on. I've invested way too much time and energy into these people, more than they ever deserved. So, update. It's been a week since I blocked my parents and we haven't spoken since. I figured they'd get the hint and leave me alone after I made it clear I wasn't giving in. But today, when I got home from work, I noticed my parents parked outside my house, waiting for me. I had a long tiring day and really wasn't in the mood for any of this. As soon as I pulled into my driveway, I honked twice and told them to leave or I'd call the cops for trespassing. Instead of driving off, they approached my car and said they wanted to talk, insisting they weren't looking for a fight and just needed me to come out and give them a chance. Honestly, I was just too drained for this. I really wasn't up for chatting about Julian at the moment, so I just wanted them to leave. I promised I'd unblock him and talk later, but I needed some time to myself right now. Then they dropped the news that Julian had moved back in with his ex because he had no other option. His girlfriend made it clear that he could only crash with her for 2 weeks, and that time was up. He tried to convince her to let him stay longer, but she said her roommates weren't cool with it, so he had to go since she promised them he wouldn't be there for more than 2 weeks and it was just a temporary fix. After that, if he wanted to stick around, he'd have to chip in for rent and other expenses because she couldn't just let him live there for free just because they were dating. They ended up arguing about it because Julian thought she was being unfair, especially since he was shutting down his business and didn't have any income right now, so he felt like he couldn't go back there anymore. It was a bummer, but it wasn't my problem, so I told my parents I still wasn't going to talk to him or let him stay with me if that's what they were hoping for. They told me that wasn't the main reason for their visit. They actually came to ask for financial help since Julian had moved back in with them. Now they had to cover all the expenses and being retired, they couldn't really afford to support him without stressing about their own future. They didn't want to stretch themselves too thin, so they were looking for my help. They mentioned I wouldn't even need to talk to Julian, I just had to send them some money for a few months until Julian could get back on his feet. This time, they seemed to expect me to say yes without much hesitation, claiming they had done a lot for me over the years and raised me to be self-sufficient. So, they felt I owed it to them to step up when they needed it. I didn't want to jump into a response, so I told them I needed to think it over and would get back to them. Honestly, I was pretty worn out from work and didn't want to make a snap decision. I thought it was fair to ask for some time to consider it because what they were asking was a big deal. For one, I had no idea how much money I'd need to send each month and there was no guarantee that Julian would be able to stand on his own anytime soon. I needed to weigh my options before committing, but instead of giving me that space, they started pressuring me right then and there. I was just chilling in my car when they kept insisting I had to do this and that I owed them something, which was really getting on my nerves. So, I finally got out and told them I was done with their nonsense and they needed to leave or I'd call the cops. They thought I was just playing around and said I wouldn't actually do it, so I warned them one last time not to push me. But they still didn't budge. I pulled out my phone and called the cops right in front of them. The look on their faces was priceless. Instead of just leaving, they stuck around to argue with me until the police showed up and had to drag them away. Anyway, that's behind me now and I've blocked them for good. I talked to my lawyer and it looks like we're going to file for a restraining order because this situation is getting way out of control and I can't keep dealing with it. So, a few days ago, my parents came over and I told them about the restraining order. Yesterday, I finally had a chat with my lawyer and we decided to move forward with it. Today, we filed the petition. I really hope I can get that protective order because their behavior is just too much. I blocked them a while back so they couldn't reach me normally, which is probably why they've been harassing me in other ways. I'm not really sure how they pulled it off, but I have a feeling they might have bribed someone or something. Ever since I reported them to the cops, things have taken a strange turn. On the day I called, nothing much happened, but the next day, my phone started blowing up with calls from random numbers. I picked up a few times, but as soon as I answered, they'd hang up. So, I blocked the first number, but then it just kept happening with others. Eventually, I decided to ignore any calls from numbers I didn't recognize because it was getting super weird and creepy. As if that wasn't enough, I started getting texts from these numbers too, threatening me with consequences for what I did and saying my parents would never forgive me. They threw around a lot of insults, calling me a selfish brat and using some pretty nasty language that I won't repeat. I'm convinced my parents are behind this, which pushed me to talk to my lawyer about getting a restraining order because this is definitely not normal behavior. At this point, they shouldn't expect any help from me. I tried to be respectful and not take action against them before since we're family, but now I realize I don't need to care about them anymore. They clearly don't care about my mental health or well-being. It's really disappointing, especially since they know I've been through a lot lately, like my divorce from Nolan, and I've struggled in my career for a couple of years after that. I've been through a lot, and now that things are finally looking up for me, it feels like some people just can't handle it and want to drag me back down. It's hard to believe someone could claim to love their child and act this way, but I guess their love isn't genuine, and I've come to terms with that. It doesn't bother me anymore. Update 4. So, it's been a few weeks since I last checked in, and to keep it short, I got a restraining order against my parents. There was a lot of drama, but I pulled it off. I'm really relieved because I found out that Julian isn't living with them anymore due to their crazy behavior. I've been swamped with work since I started a new project, so I haven't had the chance to share any updates. After my parents were served, they couldn't reach out to me, which was probably for the best given everything that's happened. Instead, they decided to talk to Julian, and he ended up reaching out to me. I never blocked him because I didn't think we'd ever contact each other again after we stopped talking, so it seemed pointless. Plus, it just slipped my mind. Anyway, he messaged me saying he was really let down that I took such a drastic step against our parents after all they've done for us. It was the same old story again. He kept reminding me that our parents raised us to be who we are today and that we should be thankful, but I was just being rude and disrespectful. I got really annoyed when I read that message because I felt like he was being so pretentious. I told him it was easy for him to say that since our parents were bending over backward to help him. I think he wanted to call me out for being selfish and entitled for not giving him the money he needed. He shot back, saying he never asked for my help and wouldn't expect it from someone as selfish as me. So, I told him he didn't need to ask because our parents were already doing all the talking for him. If he wanted to point fingers, he should look in the mirror. I guess he didn't realize how much our parents had been bugging me to help him. When I sent that message, he called me right away and I picked up because I wanted to clear the air. He asked what I was talking about, claiming he never told our parents he needed help. I filled him in on everything, and as soon as I finished, he just hung up on me. I had a feeling that Julian didn't really get how much our parents had been bugging me lately, so I thought it'd be a good idea to bring it up with him. After that chat, he went quiet on me, but I found out from other family members that he had moved out and was crashing with a friend instead of staying with our parents. Apparently, he figured out that they were asking me for money to help him out, and at one point, they even wanted me to reach out to him and offer my support, which made it clear they thought he couldn't handle things on his own. Julian took that the wrong way and thought it was a dig at his abilities, leading to a pretty nasty argument between them. I'm not sure how the rest of the family got wind of it, but I guess our parents were going around saying I had messed up my relationships and somehow turned Julian against them. A few relatives who heard from my parents came to me, saying I was in the wrong, so I decided to fill them in on the whole situation. Once everyone knew the full story, including what my parents had put me through, they realized I wasn't at fault and actually apologized for jumping to conclusions. So, right now, my parents are pretty much cut off from the whole family and it feels like they've been pushed aside by everyone. Honestly, I can't say they don't deserve it. After all the stuff they've put me through, I really think this is what they needed. No one talks to them anymore and I bet they're blaming me for it, but with that restraining order in place, they can't do anything about it. As for Julian, we're still not on speaking terms. That's not changing until he wakes up to how he messed things up before. But knowing him, I doubt that'll happen anytime soon. He's way too proud to own up to his mistakes, just like our parents. It's frustrating, but whatever. As long as I'm doing well, I'm not going to let this drag me down. I'm just going to keep my focus on my new projects and living my best life. That's all that matters to me.